I was very busy this summer, so I'm just making a single roundup video for my whole year of racing. This year, I'm still riding my 2002 SV650 Frankenstein. Over the winter, I acquired a 6x10 enclosed trailer that I've fitted with something of a Murphy bed to avoid my tent blowing away again. I also bought a generator to run my tire warmers rather than being on street-type DOTs. This year, a rulebook change shuffled classes around, both to align names with AMA and shuffle people into more populated classes for all the races. This class change resulted in my bike falling out of lightweight and into 700 twins for the most competitive class. They also have changed all of the grids to be set by Saturday qualifying, which is simply each rider's fastest lap in practices 1 and 2. Round 1 began with practice. Unfortunately, another rider made some kind of mistake and gotcha, likely on cold tires. Track temp was around 50 degrees. This shortened practice 1 to a single lap where I was out and back in, not even a fast lap. It was a good opportunity to refamiliarize myself with the track after a year of not riding it. Practice 2 was more fruitful in getting laps in. Very slow laps, however, and the slowest of anyone that weekend. After practice, it was time for the first race. It was middleweight superbike. Novice, this was just a practice 3 for me, and I had no intentions of really competing for position. Once the leader caught me on lap 4, I pulled into the pits to avoid interfering further with the fastest riders. Race 2 was the 700 twin superbike race. This race only had a few entrants, and I got lapped, but it is what it is. Unfortunately, I'm just very slow on East, and I need to get faster. Last race of the day was Open Twins. It was what it was. I was just using it for more practice, honestly. East is just a mystery to me. The day generally went well. I was very slow. I felt no confidence in turn 3. Other riders that I talked with described barely breathing the throttle on thousands and going flat out through it on 600s. At this point, I was touching the brakes and had no confidence that the front end would hold. On day 2, it started with practice 1, and it was fine. Practice 2 was also fine, but a good improvement over yesterday. I also felt more confidence in general. The schedule also got some tweaks to try and condense races and combine the thin grids. Most of that happened to affect me because the thin grids are on the smaller bikes. Race 1 was Open Twins, and Moto 3 was on the back. The next race was the 700 Twins race, and it was tacked on to the back of the middleweight novice race. This was notable because the grid, the way that it showed up, myself and one other rider was supposed to grid for the 700 Twins in the second wave. I got to my position, but there were 2 riders in the second wave area. While I sat there in neutral, waiting for the light to come on and go out, everybody except me went. The 2 riders that I had gridded with also left, so they all left and it was just me, as far as I was aware. And when that happened, all I thought was, I guess I'm first, don't crash! Since the rulebook dictates that at least a 1-place finishing penalty for a jump start, I assumed one of the jumpers was misgridded and out of class. That would mean that I would get first place. In reality, both of them were misgridded, and I was the only 700 twin out there. So I was right that I would get first, but for the wrong reason. Like most of the races this weekend, it really just turned into a practice session. More laps, more laps, more laps. Race 3 was the second 700 twins race of the day, for which I again was the only rider. Partially due to a rain and lightning delay, all the races were shortened from 7 to 6 laps. However, coming to my position on the grid, I was told by the marshal,
you're the only one on the grid. You want to just do 4 laps and call it a race? Whatever makes it easier for you guys.
I just ran the 4 laps because it would let everybody else get on with their day rather than push anyone into the incoming rainstorm that we could all see was on the horizon. After this race, I was done for the day and started packing up. About 20 minutes after I had everything in mind that I cared about getting wet packed away, it started dumping rain, and the wind picked up substantially. There were multiple awnings that got destroyed. I was very glad that I got my stuff put away when I did, and I did my best to help others pack up and keep critical things dry. Once again, another big win for the trailer. I got to sleep in my trailer on a very dry and very real bed rather than in a tent that was miserable. My biggest improvements through the weekend were mostly only rolling off in faster, significantly improving the attitudes, Tooele turn, exit, and clubhouse. I believe that the biggest time saves that I have are being full throttle through faster, cleaning up the double right-hander, particularly the exit of satisfaction, consistently exiting the attitudes at full throttle, everything after clubhouse, and turn 1 as a whole. My primary areas of focus next time on East will be full throttle through faster and nailing from the exit of the attitudes to the entry of clubhouse. These are the fastest segments of the track and by far are the lowest hanging fruit for cutting out time. A big source of my slow pace is lack of confidence in the front end. It's not iRacing and you can't just slam the wall 100 times working backwards to find the limit. I do, however, believe that I found a possible source of my lack of confidence beyond just my poor riding. I reviewed the data I gathered on tire pressure data and temperature over the weekend, both before and after most sessions. The whole time I was targeting an off-track pressure of 30 psi front at 175 Fahrenheit, 25 psi rear at 213 Fahrenheit. By the end of the day, I had the pressures in the correct region, but with significantly reduced temperatures from my hilariously slow riding not putting enough energy into the tire for maintaining an appropriate temperature. I'm abandoning temperature targets for now, and opting to focus more on getting the pressure right, and as I speed up, correcting to account and hopefully appropriately increase the temperatures. Upon review of the Michelin numbers for these tires, my front pressure target was grossly incorrect. I had used data provided on sportbiketrackgear.com, which says that the temperature with warmers should be 30 psi. However, according to Michelin's website, I should have been targeting a significantly higher hot pressure of 35 to 38. This means that I was using incorrect pressures the whole weekend on the front end, and I'm hoping that this change in future rounds will improve the feel and improve my confidence in the tire. I've contacted Sport Bike Track Gear with the information, and we'll see if they ever update the product page. This was a significantly improved round 1 compared to 2024, where I crashed in practice 1. It's also not much of an improvement since my best lap last year on East was a 217 on the Pilot Power 2CT street tires. My best this year was a 215 on the Power Cup Evo mostly slicks, and that was with a bad front pressure. It tells me exactly what I know. I'm simply not comfortable and basically paralyzed by going this fast. I am the biggest problem with me. Shocking, isn't it? Round 2 started with the goal of a sub 2-minute time on West. Throughout the day, I started at 2:11 and consistently dropped my times. My best on day 1 was a 2:06. On day 2, I took a step back to 2:10, but I did follow it up with a 2:02 while chasing someone for the first time in a race. Unfortunately, when I lost the rabbit, I dropped back to 2:05s and 2:06s the rest of the day. This incident occurred because I countersteered into the ground while still on the brakes too hard. I didn't intend to apply this steering input, but I thought about it and started to do it. Unfortunately, this will be the last time around a track for this SV. When it slid into the curb, it caught a handlebar and body slammed the other side of the bike. The frame is kind of done, and I'm done with it. I have distributed most of the parts that are worth anything to a local racer, and anything else is getting listed on eBay. And if it's not gone by the spring, it's just going in the trash. I don't care enough about it. I might ping the SV forums, but it's not a whole lot. It is what it is. Luckily, some people in the pit area, however, knew about a 2015 R3, which was 1, available, 2, track ready, and 3, at a good price. So I decided to check it out on the way home and somewhat impulsively bought it. But round 3, I didn't get any video because it was on the new bike. My goal for this round 3 weekend on the R3 was simply to get used to it. Starting out, it felt pretty good. I put up a 2:17.8 in practice 1, and by the end of the weekend, my best was a 2:08. Considering that last time on East, the best I did was a 2:05, and this time I'm on a bike with about 40 horsepower instead of 60, I would say that's a pretty good start. Round 4 was supposed to be on East again. However, it got shuffled to West because a curb decided that it wanted to bump up 3 or 4 inches from some temperature fluctuations, and it was right on the exit. If you were to hit it, it would have likely dented a rim. The alligator had jumped up in the wrong direction, for those of you who understand what that means. Round 4 was also the first time that I have ever done a track day at Utah Motorsports Campus. I mean Burt Brothers Motor Park, because what is the name? This was the first time that I did a 3-day race weekend instead of a 2-day race weekend, and it was seriously beneficial. I do wish that it had been East as originally planned, since that's the configuration that I'm weaker on. However, it was what it was. For the track day, I was in the intermediate group, and it was very rewarding to finally pass people on track and, sort of mix it up instead of just have everybody fly by me. It was a big boost to my confidence, and it gave me a better sense of what was going on. This was the breakthrough of the weekend for me, and it spawned the rest of the excellent weekend that I was about to have. Back on my strong layout, and with a bike that I jive with, a couple of tips from fellow riders at the nature trail, practice 1 started strong, and I put in a 1:58.434. That was my fastest time on West and the first sub 2 minute lap anywhere at UMC. I was absolutely ecstatic when I saw the sheets for this. It was amazing. The rest of the weekend was a consistent improvement, eventually culminating in a 1:52.953. There are 2 races that I wish I had on video that I unfortunately didn't get. The first of these was the lightweight superbike race. The first 3 laps of this race I spent catching Kyle, who at the time I believe was on an R3. My launches may be good, but going into turn 1 I am very poor. It's 100% a mental issue, and I don't think about the reduced speed from a standing start. I just use my normal brake mark, and people who I should be far ahead of go zooming past because I'm braking way early. I'm also simply lacking confidence for the first 3 to 4 turns anytime I get on track, so a big gap gets built by those ahead of me. This is an issue for me in iRacing as well. I need to practice more to get better confidence at just sending it at race pace from the start. After those 3 or 4 laps of catching Kyle, I followed him for a lap or so to see where I was stronger, and I could tell right hook and the D's were my biggest relative strength. I think the slight elevation change going into the D's where you can't see the left-hand apex on entry throws people off, and that speed delta carries all the way through to turn 9. On lap 4, I set up a pass into the D's while the lead lap bikes caught us, and it seemed to throw off Kyle. I got around him, but coming through 10, and once he caught back up to me, he passed me on the front half. For the rest of the lap, for lap 5, I kept him in range, waiting for my chance on lap 6, the final lap since the leaders had passed us. Going into right hook on lap 6, I did my best to get a good drive out and went around the outside through the D's and carried it the rest of the lap to the checkered flag. This was amazing. I had finally passed someone for position on track. The other race, and the last race that I ran of the weekend, was a very similar start. I started well, I got pulled away from, and by lap 3 or 4, I had caught up to Jojo. He's on an SV650. I sat behind him for the back half of lap 4 and saw that he had a similar relatively slow D section. On lap 6, I passed him through there with a similar outside move and carried it onto the front stretch starting lap 7, the final lap. He outpowered me and led through turn 1, but I caught up some until Scream, where he outpowered me again down the back straight into Black Rock. I caught up some on the brakes, and into right hook, I thought about making a move to the inside but decided against it. That complex is not my strongest, and I didn't want to wash out into him or lose time on exit. He had a much better exit through 6 and into the D's, and I couldn't catch him enough. Into 8 and 9, I caught him a bit more, but in 10, I braked later and tried to go around the outside to make the podium. Unfortunately, I dumped it, and I think that this crash happened because I was too tight under the bars while applying the throttle. It was a very soft crash. It was so soft that my airbag didn't activate. It was the last lap, and the bike stopped sliding in a pretty sketchy spot, so I ran to the outside barriers and watched everyone else finish. Walked myself to the infield care center to say I was fine. It was a disappointing end to a great weekend, but next time I'm just going to pass him into right hook, and that'll be that. I can use the back half of West to build a gap and hold my position through the front half of the lap where the power is more important. All in all, it was a great weekend. Even though I crashed, I did score points because I completed enough of the race. I also set my new PB at a 1:52.953. Crash damage was very minimal, just a new case guard, a new bar, and a new peg had me all fixed up for pretty cheap. Round 5, which was supposed to be on West, but from the curb funk moved it back to East so that the season configuration skew matched the original calendar. On East, I am significantly slower. The number people normally give as the split between East and West is 4 seconds. At this point, my best on East was a 2:05 and my best on West was a 1:52. Not exactly a promising difference. That's a solid 13 seconds. The weekend started with a mad scramble on Saturday morning looking for an oil filter because I made a mistake and didn't recheck the rulebook about what model of K&N was disallowed. This led to an emergency 7:30 a.m. oil change with a Kawasaki oil filter from Cole and missing P1. Everything got sorted out, however, and I put down a 207 in P2. In the Sportsman race, where I basically just treated it as another practice, I made a 206.5. The rest of the day continued with some small time saves, and a 202.9 was the best I could manage. A crisp 10 seconds slower than West and 6 slower than the typical split would be between the sides. I think most of this time is being lost everywhere but the attitudes, with faster and Tooele turn hurting me the most. These are some of the fastest turns on the track. Something other than pure speed I need to work on is dealing with motorcycle cautions versus automotive cautions. I'm a big-time IndyCar viewer and I watch most IMSA races, but I don't really watch much motorcycle racing. In the four-wheeled world, when a car becomes immobilized because it's crashed or has broken down and it's not behind a barrier or somewhere otherwise protected, full course yellows come out. Safety crews come out, do their thing, everybody's at a reduced speed behind the pace car. This is not what happens for bikes. For bikes, you get a caution flag in that corner, and if there's a crash truck off to the side, you're still racing. You might see an ambulance flag, only to come around a corner and have an ambulance broadside to you right on the racetrack while you're flying down the road at like 60 miles an hour. It's very different from what I'm used to seeing with cars. Round 6 also started with some chaos in the pit, realizing that I had mistakenly left my transponder plugged in at home. I plugged it in along with my airbag, but had moved some stuff and it fell behind the table that I had it charging on. Lugnut came to my rescue with his secondary transponder. Huge thanks to Lug and Cole for saving my last 2 rounds. This one was on the outer layout of UMC, now Burt Brothers Motor Park. This is not exactly the most interesting layout for a lightweight bike like my R3. However, it was neat to see the speedo say 110 plus into turn 1 throughout the weekend. The 2 biggest changes with this layout are a new corner, Witchcraft, that leads into the Attitudes. Witchcraft is a relatively high-speed right-hander, and it sets you up offline from the typical east entry to the Attitudes. My best lap of the weekend was a 2:32.633.
Now watch this drive.
The most fun racing I had this weekend was with Kyle, who is now on a ZX4RR. We were swapping spots for a while in the lightweight race. Right hook, the Attitudes, and wind-up release were places that I was clearly stronger. However, he could catch me through Scream, Tooele Turn, Clubhouse, and the front straight. During our battle, he had made a mistake going into Witchcraft and rocketed by me. 2 laps later, there was a red flag for a bike that went down at the top of the Attitudes in a blind corner and ended up on line. Between Kyle and I, the front straight definitely showed his power over the R3. One place that I can easily make up time on Kyle is in Tooele Turn. I need to carry more speed and trust the exit curbing. Through Scream, I actually need to fix Dreamboat and Workout, not Scream itself. I should not be rolling off for either Dreamboat or Workout. The one time during the weekend that I tried this, unfortunately my camera was off. However, I went off track at pretty high speed, somewhere around 70 or 80 miles an hour, and it was not a great time. But I did keep it up and called it good since it was the last race of the weekend, so I just pit after that. The final racing event of the year was the awards ceremony. It was a good time at the University of Utah football stadium, if only they hadn't been part of ruining the Pac-12. Before the banquet on Saturday, I drove down Friday to spend the night with JoJo, who had graciously hosted me. I also got him all the bits of the SV that I had destroyed and that he needed to make his endurance bike happy. At the awards ceremony, there was a lot of just chilling with people that I normally see in a fairly tightly scheduled, gotta get things done environment, but this was in a relaxed area. The other half of the club, the supermoto side, was also there, so there were plenty of people who I had never seen before. At the end of the day, I earned 2nd place in 700 Twin Superbike and 700 Twin Supersport, primarily because I showed up to every race. The award that I truly earned, was Sportsman of the Year from the club. I don't think that I gave a particularly strong acceptance thank you to the club for the award, and AZ had to step in and help put things in perspective as to how my first 2 years of racing have gone, where I started with track riding in Utah, and any time that I was chilling in the pits or not getting my own stuff ready, I was trying to help others get their stuff ready when they needed to get out on track. I'm very flattered to have been given this award, and I hope to keep helping everyone the best that I can in the pits and getting onto the track. After the event, a few of us went out and had some more drinks, and I ended up back at JoJo's for the next morning to go home. Overall, this year was significantly improved over last year. One of the major improvements was my trailer. Having a real bed and an easy-to-keep warm overnight box that I could sleep in was a massive value. Another major improvement was the R3. I did not jive well with that SV. I am not sure why, it just never felt planted, especially the front end. Finally, myself. I became significantly more comfortable at high speed, actually being in a fight for position, and properly racing with people. My strongest points on track are Blackrock, the Ds, the Attitudes, and launching. Blackrock and the Ds, I feel like I'm willing to enter those turns with more speed than lots of people in my relative speed range. The brake mark that I have for Blackrock could likely be improved, but it would sacrifice consistency. The Attitudes feel as though I've finally made it to a point where I'm able to go through them at 95% of my best speed 90% of the time. Part of this coming from a gear selection change, and another part from getting more value out of the uphill braking section. Finally, launching. Apparently this is something that I just have some skill with on whatever bike I'm on, and others don't seem to have it as much. Whatever, man, they're free spots and I'll take them. My weak points on the track are mostly right turns. Dreamboat and faster are the high speed rights, and I always feel like my front tire just wants to float off into the distance. Some body position changes have helped make significant strides, but there's more to be found. Right hook, precision, maybe you'll make it, satisfaction, and windup are all medium to slower right-handers. In those, I simply lack the confidence to throw it in. I think a lot of this comes from running the nature trail in a clockwise orientation so frequently and taking the carousel to the left rather than to the right. That's got me much more comfortable taking left-hand turns. For workout and Tooele turn, as well as release, those are my weakest lefts. Workout and Tooele turn are high-speed lefts where being precise with your line makes a big impact, and I just don't have the consistency to make them properly fast every time. I'm definitely bleeding at least 2 seconds a lap each time I take those turns alone. As for release, it feels like I can bake more of the banking and that I'm never set up correctly coming out of windup. Comparing myself to Martina, one of the riders who pits near me and is on a ZX4RR racing in similar classes, my fastest laps of the year for East and West were 2:02.987 and 1:52.953. Martina, who is consistently fighting for second place of the lightweight riders, ran a 1:52.921 on East and a 1:50.967 on West. This puts me 10 seconds and 2 seconds back from her. In terms of speed, on East she's running at 63.76 miles an hour on average, and I'm at 58.54 miles an hour. That's 5 miles an hour faster, and she's literally jogging away from me on East. However, on West, she's only 1.3 miles an hour faster. I can make that happen. 1 mile an hour faster everywhere is no problem, and I can and will do that next year. In total, in 2025, I spent around $20,000 on racing. Granted, this was significantly inflated with the cost of the trailer and a new-to-me race bike. I spent around $11,000 on actually racing without those exceptional costs. Next year, I expect to spend somewhere around $12,000 with a bit of inflation and cost of transportation as well as entry fees. Over the winter, I do have some maintenance to do. I've already sent my shock off and received it back for a rebuild. I need to rebuild my fork, grease the head bearing, grease the swing arm pivot, valve clearances, some airbox modifications, a clutch swap, and finally do a little bit of a real paint job and wrap job on my fairings instead of just straight white. I'm excited for the coming year, and I'll be fighting for podiums in my class equivalents of lightweight, Moto 3, and 700 twins. Thank you for watching. Enjoy.